Picture this. We're stepping way back in time, deep into the shadows of archaic Japan, well before the 4th century. We're going to unravel a psychological and historical mystery recorded in the ancient chronicles of the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki. It's a truly fascinating story about humanity's relationship with the dark and, honestly, the fatal consequences of demanding to see what is meant to remain hidden.
Now, think about your own experiences for a second. You know that feeling when you're in a pitch black room? We all know that incredibly unsettling sensation of staring into the shadows, our eyes playing tricks on us as we desperately try to make out shapes that just aren't there. But what happens when we flip that entirely? What happens when a person is offered something profoundly real and absolute darkness, and they stubbornly refuse to accept it?
Section 1. The Mirror's Dark Inverse.
So, we've talked before about a very common human phenomenon, the Bloody Mary trope. You're in a dark room and you insist on using your eyes because there's almost no light you strain to see. And by looking too hard, your mind actually conjures a phantom. You end up seeing something that was never actually there.
And that strange psychological quirk sets up our core mystery today. We know we have this tendency to invent things in the dark out of sheer fear and visual desperation, but we're going to look at the exact mirror image of that story. We're looking at a man who was offered something completely unseen in the pitch blackness, and who completely rejected it, simply because his eyes couldn't verify it.
Section 2. Divination in Ancient Japan. In ancient Japan, and we're talking long before the elaborate, colorful courts of later eras, rites of divination were always held at night. These took place on a very specific, plain, sacred ground known as the Saniwa. And this wasn't just, a matter of scheduling. It was a deeply spiritual technology. Surrendering your sight by putting out the light was exactly how these ancient people believed they could come face to face with what lay beyond human knowing.
You have to remember, darkness back then was deeply, genuinely feared. Yet, the light was extinguished intentionally during these rites. The philosophy here is just profound. Darkness was the threshold. To meet the gods, you literally had to let go of the physical world you could see. You had to surrender your sight to encounter the divine. Section 3. The Saniwa Sealed Room Drama.
Okay, so here is where our story really begins. We are at Kashi, down in Kyushu. The 14th Emperor Chūai has traveled west to put down a rebellion. And he's this solemn, ancient warrior. Imagine him dressed in a plain white archaic robe, wearing a large curved bead magatama necklace. He's got his hair bound up in the ancient style, a full dark beard, and he's carrying a long bow with a quiver of arrows on his back. Seeking guidance on the fate of his realm, he initiates a divination rite in the night sanctuary. It becomes this incredibly tense, sealed room drama lit only by the faintest flicker of an oil lamp. The ritual starts. The emperor himself plays the koto, a Japanese zither, its notes piercing the dark to summon the gods. His minister waits quietly in the shadows for the divine word. Then, a god descends upon the Empress Jingu. She is this incredibly dignified, serene woman, her black hair bound with a simple ornament, wearing layered magatama beads and an upper ancient robe in white and purple, tied with a green and white striped sash. Through her, the unseen divine presence enters the room. Through the Empress, the ancient kami, these are the divine gods of Japanese myth, picture a majestic pair, a female deity in flowing white robes and a bearded male holding a long ancient spear, standing against gold clouds. They speak a profound promise into the dark. The voice echoes. To the west lies a land rich with gold, silver, and treasures. Rather than these rebels, I will give you that country. It's a stunning, otherworldly offer delivered entirely from the unseen realm. Section 4. Refusing the unseen. But the emperor, he doubts the voice. He abruptly stops playing the koto. He climbs to high ground and peers out into the night, looking toward the west where this promised land is supposed to be. But all he sees is the absolute blackness of the dark ocean. His physical eyes give him absolutely nothing. Staring at that empty, black horizon, the emperor declares, "There is no land to the west. This is a lying god." With this cold, firm skepticism, he pushes the koto aside. The music stops, and he falls completely silent. Now, in our modern context, Chūai's reaction makes perfect sense, right? It's an admirably empirical stance. He insists on believing only what can be physically observed. But you have to remember, in the Sanitwa, the darkness of the right exists precisely so that sight may be surrendered. To cling to the visible, to demand physical proof in the presence of the divine, well, it was a devastating, fatal error.
Section 5. The Fatal Silence.
Out of the pitch black, the unseen god's fury thunders through the sanctuary. You are not the one to rule this realm. The divine presence, having been completely rejected by the emperor's demand for physical sight, casts him out with a single absolute decree. The atmosphere in that dark room shifts to sheer terror. The minister desperately begs the emperor to keep playing, trying to mend this severed connection. Very reluctantly, the emperor draws the koto back. He strikes a few faint, thin notes, but those notes slowly fade into the night, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. When the attendants finally raise a torch to pierce the darkness, the light reveals the terrifying truth. The emperor is already dead.
Section 6. The Seen and the Unseen.
So this brings us full circle to that opening concept. The duality here is crystal clear. On one hand, you have the person in the dark who looks too hard, conjuring a phantom from their own desperation, and on the other, you have Emperor Chūai, enveloped in the dark of a sacred rite, who refuses to trust the unseen voice simply because he can't see anything. He demands the visible, and in doing so, he literally loses a god and his life. Because ultimately, whether we are inventing phantoms out of fear or rejecting incredible promises out of empirical stubbornness, the underlying truth is exactly the same. Both individuals are the exact same fragile creature, constantly wavering between the safety of the seen and the vast, terrifying potential of the unseen. Which leaves us with a lingering, slightly haunting thought to consider. When you inevitably find yourself in the dark, without the comfort of your sight to guide you, do you look too hard for what isn't there? Or do you, like the ancient emperor, stubbornly refuse to see what truly is? Thank you for exploring the dark with me.